Hey there, internets. So, a very late Saturday night video. I've had an issue with an elbow, so you won't see this arm going up much. I wasn't even sure I was going to get it out tonight. But, AB InBev's Budlite sales are down 30%, and all their brands are down. Now, they say it's only 1% for the period of our global sales. But the United States is a huge market, and they're only talking for the period. And I think as it extends, it's going to go higher. And so now they're trying a new marketing push. I'll include a link to that in the description below about how they're going to aim at they're going to do aim at the disgruntled fans, and they're going to try and have camouflage cans and Harley Davidson limited edition cans. Unless you're a collector of beer cans, it ain't going to do anything. We have to let up. We have to let up without. We have to not let up without mercy. When I look up I tried to find more about their investors from a site called Simply Wall Street. It said individual investors own 29% of Anheuser-Busch AB InBev, but private companies control 42% of the company. I found in another article, I'm not going to link to that, but it's 50% of the company is controlled by 3 investors. And some of these are a handful of people control one institutional investor. It's a private company, not a public company, that sort of thing. And so I'll include a link to the Wikipedia article. Ownership, it says, Anheuser-Busch InBev is controlled by Belgian families Van Dam, De Mevis, and De Spolberch, who, as of 2015, owned a combined 28.6% of the company, and Brazilian investors. It lifts off Jorge Paulo Lehmann, or Jorge, I assume, but I don't speak Portuguese. I know that can be pronounced that way in Spanish. Carlos Alberto Cisoprera, apologies to these people if I butcher their names, have it wrong. And Marcel Telles, and again, I'm doing the best I can, who own 22.7% through their private investment firm 3G Capital. So you got 3 people involved with 3G Capital. Effectively, a small number of people really influence that company. Effectively, 6 families control 51.3% of the company. And part of the issue is they're trying to use very insulting marketing, thinking they can just make this go away. They can't. So what they really need to do, and they've hired Republican marketing people or campaign people to try and figure out their marketing to get their customers back. It's not going to work because they don't understand what they did. And so to that end, if this ever gets better back to the AB InBev management, I submit this sample letter that they should put out with the key things are in here, but it may be more wordy, may not be. I'm not a marketing guy. I pretty much did it in one take. So a sample letter of what they should say to our valued customers. Several weeks ago, our marketing team, led by Alyssa Heinerscheid and Daniel Blake, decided to partner with TikTok creator Dylan Mulvaney with a custom can. This was above all a serious mistake that we deeply regret. Both the fact that Dylan is extremely irritating to large numbers of people, it was an automatic endorsement of Dylan's life choices, and the agenda that Dylan promotes. And the fact that most of Dylan's followers are minors, but also in the very serious way, misunderstanding our core customers. We have failed to understand that the issues surrounding the LBGTQ plus issues have many people among our core customers feeling that it was being pushed down their throats constantly, and that we were the straw that broke the camel's back. We then tried to ignore the boycott, then simply target the marketing specifically to those core customers in some of the most insulting ways imaginable. By entering identitarian politics and then trying to target another identity to seek forgiveness, we dug an ever deeper hole. Now, by doing these things, we have angered our core customers, the new people we sought to market to, and this cannot go on. Much has been made on the social political agenda on these social political agendas, often called diversity, equity, inclusion, and environmental social governance, often referred to as DEI and ESG, respectively. And we, from now on, will strive to reject these ideas. We should simply have concentrated on making great beer and marketing in funny and creative ways. We now realize that there were better ways to promote our product to new markets, and by trying to market to one group, we angered everybody. And they have made us pay for it with almost all of our brands down in sales from last year, and Budlite in particular being down 30% year over year. Ultimately, our core customers are the greater group, and we must please, and are the ones to whom our future customers will follow by example. We recognize that our product has appeared in the fridges, coolers, and barbecues of, in some cases, multiple generations of the same families. We are truly sorry for insulting our customers, and we will strive to do better, and we ask your forgiveness. To that end, while Alyssa Heinerscheid and Daniel Blake were on leave today, I personally fired them both. However, I realize that it is not enough, and as captain of the ship, I am also responsible. As such, I have informed our leadership that I will be stepping down myself effective December 31st, so that I might get the ship righted and ensure a smooth transition. Sincerely, Brendan Whitworth, who is the North American Division CEO or president for Anheuser-Busch. That's what they should say. That would cause the boycott to end quickly, because they would be showing actual repentance. And we should, if they were to do that, take them back, because you have to offer, and there's some people that said, I'll never drink their products again. I never drank Bud Light. My brother brought over Budweiser once, and when I say that young people follow their parents, my dad drank Budweiser. I think there was some Bud Light in the fridge. He drank some other, I remember him drinking Rainier as a kid, which for those outside Washington is a smaller regional brand. It had some great commercials. And some other brands appeared in my elders' coolers and fridges. I don't remember what exactly the grandpa I knew, who was actually my mom's stepdad, I don't remember what he actually drank. But I saw the full range of cheap lagers. And the biggest beneficiary of this may end up being Yuengling, because they haven't changed anything. They said, hey, we've been here for longer than Budweiser, still family owned. And they already had red, white, and blue on their packaging. They already had stars and stripe pattern stuff. They already said America was great. And now people are turning to them. And there are other people coming. The reason we won't get this letter is because of the real enemy in this. It's not Dylan Mulvaney. It's not just the LGBTQ movement being pushed down our throats. The real issue is environmental social justice. The way it works is, I had somebody tell me I should explain how this works. There's people that don't know. ESG is basically a social credit score for businesses. They say, well, what are you doing to be more green? When you go to get a loan or to bank with somebody or you get investors, they say, what are you doing to be more green? How is this going to benefit the environment? What are you doing for that? Not how economically viable it is. They're saying in the social part, it's like, do you support diversity, equity, inclusion? Or how diverse is your board? How many women do you have in important places? Do you have any trans people in important places? Some of these banks that were failing cared more about diversity, equity, inclusion than they did in making good business decisions. And governance is, of course, a lot of your typical corporate governance stuff. And that's a little less political by itself, but how is your company run? You have an independent board of directors, those sorts of things. But it's effectively a social credit score. And if you don't know how social credit works, it's being at least experimented with in China. So if you're saying unpopular things, you lose points. The idea that might work is you go to buy a case of Budlite for your barbecue, and they say, "Sorry, John, but your credit card doesn't approve the purchase." You find out, "Sorry, John, you've been drinking too much beer. We think you need to lay off the beer." Or you go to buy a replacement vehicle, and they say, "Yeah, sorry, you already own, by our records, a large pickup. You can't have a second one. We don't like you." There was some YouTubers with conservative political views recently debanked in Britain with no explanation. Just said, "We can't support your kind of business." They won't explain why. And the quartering was talking about it. That's the social aspect. And like I said, the government has an aspect, but that's how social credit systems work. The social credit systems are actually very much a government thing, and we absolutely should not have our own version. Because I want you to, we have to continue with the parallel economy. Yes, the people at the Daily Wire have created several of their own businesses and said, "Give your money to us instead of somebody that hates you." Tim Pool, Jeremy from the Quartering have created their own coffees. Tim Pool's trying to create his own, entertainment. Yes, we need to do those things. But we got to start thinking bigger, because we'll always be restricted by, if you're a public company trying to get investors. Look at what happened to Black Rifle Coffee. Maybe they were there for the grift and just trying to promote their products to a narrow group by being all pro-Trump and pro-2A and all this. But they had sketch-like commercials that were very, very funny. I don't drink coffee. I said if they came up with a line of teas, I might do it. They could name them after service rifles, like Short Magazine Lee Enfield or something. Maybe I'd be interested. Maybe that could be their English breakfast tea. But when they went public, they started siding with some of the woke stuff. And companies are absolutely terrified of these minor groups. Whoopi Goldberg was like, "Bud Light doesn't need to be afraid of them. They need to be afraid of us." Except that the group that's largely boycotting Bud Light is much larger than her political ideology. It's become a meme. People are saying, "Do not drink Bud Light." I have people I know that normally might not agree with my politics are laughing their butts off at the memes and YouTube shorts busting on Bud Light. And the principled thing, so we need our own institutional investors, our own banks. Mike Lindell, I think, got debanked. He was going to start his own bank. I haven't researched to see if he actually did. But we need our own banks. We need our own institutional investors. If this means we have to create our own card and maybe we call it America Pay or something, and say to use instead of American Express, MasterCard, and Visa, because some of the credit card companies are trying to create their own code for gun purchases. Maybe that's what we need to do, and have our own credit card where we say, "Oh, you don't take America Pay? Fine, we're not doing business with you." And push that hard. And then that creates the question, do we just say our institutional investors are only going to look at the economics, or are we going to look at other issues? And it's a hard decision. The most principled stand is that would be to say we're not, because we don't believe in this idea that companies should be telling you how to live your life, or that the government should. And as far as like an actual social credit for individuals, I totally disagree with it. I mean, I'm a traditional martial artist. I believe strongly in traditional martial arts. But there's a MMA fighter in China. He can't take certain buses because he has shown that, at least the Chinese traditional arts, they have not had people that were actually effective against him. Is that right? The Chinese government doesn't want that, because the various types of Chinese arts are a big cultural thing to the Chinese. So maybe but do you just ignore that, or do you fight fire with fire? Do we, it's that thing of they have their rules where they cause chaos and destruction, and don't abide by what's supposed to be the rules of civilized society, fighting with cops, burning stuff down, and conservatives we stand on a street corner and protest typically. And typically government comes down on any of us that do start causing riots. And of course, we're not in the habit of wearing masks and hiding the people that cause that kind of damage. And we don't believe in it. And I want you to hear me out, maybe it's time for our own version of ESG. I've been contemplating this the last couple of weeks. Maybe conservatives, in creating our parallel economy, conservatives, and I'm very libertarian in my views, need to say we have our own version of ESG. So when somebody comes and they're in the middle, or maybe one of these places is struggling and they need new lenders or they need new investors, or we invest in something with a large amount of money through an institutional investor that we create, we can say, instead of environmental social governance, we could make it economic social governance. Because ultimately we should be doing economics as the economic viability of an investment should be the first consideration. So you just say, look, is this economically sound? Some of these companies are more concerned with being green than being economically viable. They were more concerned with diversity, equity, and inclusion than being economically viable. Credit Suisse was one of them. They could go on and on and on about the fact that they had a trans person on their board or for one of their major executives. But they weren't worrying about other things like economic viability. SVB, Signature Bank, they were the same way. Then we say social. Well, rather than that's where the diversity, equity, and inclusion comes in. How about we make it meritocracy, tradition, and family? And I was originally going to call it, family, tradition, and meritocracy, but meritocracy needs to be first. What are the merits? Are you promoting people on your merits? That's the first thing we should be asking. What is the competence of your board of directors? Are your next generation people working their way through the corporate ranks being promoted on merit? Or are you asking, we need to have more women, or we need to have more trans people, or seek out more people of a certain race, or not of a certain race? We should be judging based on that. What are your merits? Thomas Sowell had commented, he's always good at the meme-worthy stuff. I didn't find his sparring with Biden in the 80s in a Senate hearing to be his best moment. But his point was that at that time, there wasn't enough. It was an argument. Biden was trying to say, you're just saying that black people aren't capable. He's like, no, at this time, there's not enough people who are black and had the academic background to hack schools like Harvard and Yale. But there were always some that would, whether it was a Thomas Sowell, who didn't go to Harvard or Yale, but a Herman Cain, extraordinary individual. Condoleezza Rice, very extraordinary individual. Dr. Condoleezza Rice, excuse me. But they needed a few generations of just get a good degree, get a job. Now you can afford the private schools. Now you can afford the tutors for your kid. And pretty soon you would have people on their merits getting into Harvard and Yale who were not white. And Asians quite often do. So are you promoting on merit? Are you in tune with the traditions of your customers and understanding that, our customers, they go hunting every fall. We need to attend to promotions that go with that. Are you maybe promoting traditional marriage? Family would be the things that would really, with tradition, I want to go back to that. It could even be, this doesn't have to come off as a fascist thing, but it could be, are you upholding the traditions of your customers, of your employees, the people around you? Or are you tearing them down just to tear them down? It goes right into that thing of people on the left just wanting to watch the world burn. And lastly, with family, this is where things might sound a bit progressive, but is your company policies, is your advertising family friendly? Dylan Mulvaney was not family friendly. Advertising with drag queens is not family friendly. There is no such thing as a family friendly drag show, period. Do you have employee policies that say we're going to have a better you say, how are you promoting meritocracy, tradition, and family? And they can say, oh, well, we're buying better health insurance for people with families, or we're keeping it lower cost for our employees, picking up more of the tab ourselves. Or they could say, we're making sure our schedules are such that people can actually go to church on a Saturday or a Sunday, with their family. Or if you are Jewish, on Saturday, Jewish or Muslim, maybe you're in Israel. Same thing. Some of these multinationals, and we got to create our own multinationals eventually, and this will take a long time. We try to make sure our employees are not having to work constant overtime so that they can plan to get off work, go to their kids' baseball game. Those kind of things. They could easily do that without having to being like a fascist type thing, or even a leftist type thing. Are they giving adoption benefits to their employees? Because you can, if you adopt in a lot of cases with family, or you can take time with the new addition to your family that way versus just giving birth. One that Lowe's did when I worked for them is they had a special deal with a fertility clinic if people were struggling with having children. They could do those things without it coming off, and liberals would actually, or should, like them. But it won't just give them a reason to say, oh, we have an alternative. It might even push them to uphold our values. So think about that for a minute. Maybe we should have our own version. Now, obviously, most of us are not going to be able to create our own lenders and institutional investors. But, we can choose who we invest in, who we shop with. It doesn't have to stop with Budlite. Years ago, I never been in a Buffalo Wild Wings, but I decided not to ever go into one. And, liberal Democrats get really irritated if conservatives suggest a boycott because they say, look at how you're hurting all these people because you don't like this policy that we think is reasonable. And a friend of mine got all upset because I said, I won't be going to Buffalo Wild Wings because they don't allow people to concealed carry. He said, they're just trying to keep their customers safe and their employees safe. You think about the employees you're hurting by doing that. You know what? Liberal Democrats wouldn't think one iota about the employees they're hurting by not shopping somewhere. And we have to not let up. If it means that we go years without an AB InBev product, fine. We need to make it hurt, because a short-term loss, these institutional investors and banks pushing this ESG garbage, they'll expect it. They'll just shrug their shoulders. But if they go years, ultimately they're out to make money too. And if they go years of seeing declining sales and seeing their investments crater, they'll take notice and back off. And so we need to, if it means economically destroying AB InBev, fine. Sorry, if you're a distributor for AB InBev, sorry, but I can't buy that product. I'm not drinking a Shock Top when I would want a lager. I think that's a lager. I'm not buying any Elysian products. I'm not buying any Modelo products. I never did drink Corona to begin with. I'm not buying them until we get an apology from AB InBev. Until they are actually repentant. So if you want to correct your situation, you tell AB InBev your marketing strategy and dumping all this money into it is insulting the customers. It's pissing them off more. Just apologize. And if that means that this tiny segment of the population, which is the LBGTQ agenda and their allies, and it's the allies they're more afraid of, because only less than, I mean, in all truth, I told somebody less than 10% of the population is LBGTQ, and that person said, "You're being overly generous," but I get your point. And I said, "I'm being generous with it. It's realistically like 3%. So not the 21% that you got a whole bunch of young people claiming." You just say, we're not doing it. Because you know what? Most of those people that are in that, they aren't buying beer anyway. They're having mixed drinks, or they're buying really expensive beer. So in the end, ESG, that is our real target. It needs to be ended. And if that means AB InBev must go down in this country, if that means Budweiser goes bankrupt in this country and disappears from store shelves, it will have to be a lesson for everybody in the future, because this should be a lesson of how not to handle a controversial situation. Until then, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe if you haven't. Leave a comment to fuel the algorithm. It helps. Sorry to be so long-winded, but that's our real goal. Until then, you all take care.